So, good evening, everyone. So tonight I'll be doing something different than I'm used to doing um, for SAMHSEC. And tonight I'll be focusing on five different veterans who have, in the last 3 years, sent me either photos, letters, or copies of their books they've written. And one of them is British. One is British. Two are Germans, and two are Americans. In June of 2021, I saw a post on Instagram by the historian on the screen, the Dutch historian, and he made a post about getting in contact with a German veteran named Gunther Klotzek. And he mostly talked about his toy rocking horse collection that he constantly posts about on Facebook. And a couple of months later, I went to search for him and I friended him on Facebook and sent him a message that um, I wanted to know his full story because we got a very brief overview of it on the Instagram post. And he got back to me and he sent me his book, Memories of an Eventful Life, Memories of German Veteran Gunther Klotzek, which he obviously signed for me, as well as send a picture of himself that is signed. And a brief overview of his life um, is he joined the German Wehrmacht in 1942 at 19 years old, and he served with the 23rd Infantry Regiment of the 11th Infantry Division and saw extensive combat on the Eastern Front. And a very interesting part of his story is that while fighting in the East, his unit of 80 men stormed a Russian position, and during the counterattack, Gunther lay down behind a machine gun and fired until the ammunition ran out. He then noticed he was the sole surviving German, and he had a shoulder injury for being shot during the counterattack. And while the Soviets went from German to German, clubbing them with rifles and stabbing them with bayonets if they dared move, he held a pistol in his hand to end his life quickly if they wanted to take him as prisoner. And one Soviet soldier stepped on his hand. Um, and now, for obviously, some members might be veterans of the border war or have been in military uniform will know that those boots are not soft, they are very hard. So it was a miracle he didn't squeal or move. And the Soviet soldier walked on. And after the surrender of Germany, he spent years in a Soviet gulag in Siberia. And after being examined by a doctor back in Germany, he was informed that because of his life in the gulag, his life expectancy would be shortened considerably. And Gunther joked, saying, quote, "Then perhaps I shall only live to be 100." Unquote. And he wrote a book about it. He wrote this book about his life. Um, and I consider it one of my most prized possessions. And Gunther was very kind-hearted and down to earth, and for decades preached against Nazism and fascism. And in the afternoon of 11 December of last year, I was scrolling through Facebook and this post unfortunately came up announcing that Gunther has passed away. And as you can see from reactions and shares and comments, he was an incredibly beloved individual. Now, another post by the Dutch historian was about German veteran Kurt Salterberg. And I want to read the letter he sent to me. And it goes, as you can see on screen as well. Dear Sir, thank you very much for your interest in my person. As you may know, I was a simple soldier of the Wehrmacht and never a member of the Nazi Party. I was transferred from the German military operations at the Russian front to the Wolfshausen by chance. Again, by chance, I was assigned to Spurkrace, the Lok District's A1, the living quarters of Adolf Hitler, and thus witnessed the events of 20 July 1944, which I try to describe in my book as best to my knowledge. Frequently I am considered being a hero, but I do not perceive myself as such. I had been at that place at that time merely by coincidence and had only attended to my duties as a simple soldier. All my life I have stood for justice and truthfulness. The peaceful togetherness of people is a deep concern of mine, especially because I experienced terror and the senselessness of brutality, war, and ostracizing ideologies. Now, Kurt was the last living witness to Operation Valkyrie, the assassination attempt on Hitler in July 1944. And the following sentences are paraphrasements of his own words. And he says he's unequivocally in his regret and revulsion for everything that the Nazis represented, including the Holocaust. Hitler was a catastrophe, a disaster, and thank God Germany lost the war. He has dedicated much of the last 30 years of his life lecturing on the cruelty of war and the Nazis, and has also revisited the Wolf's Lair 4 times. As a boy, he says, he was part of a generation that got swept up in a wicked nationalist euphoria. It felt as innocent as joining the Boy Scouts. By the time he became a soldier, his simple intent was to defend his homeland from being overrun by Russia and the rest of the Allies. His interaction with Hitler at the Wolf's Lair was in retrospect strangely personable. The dictator apparently was capable of charisma and camaraderie with his rank and file soldiers that didn't betray him as the monster he was. The July plot that Kurt says he witnessed, he says Stauffenberg was scheduled to meet with the Fuhrer that day, and Kurt says he was one of the guards that let the colonel into the inner security zone. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary to him, and he says he was nearby when the bomb exploded. And Kurt turned 100 years old on 8 January 2023, but sadly passed away on 27 November 2023, just a few days before Gunther. Now let's go a bit to the west of the continent to Britain. And the veteran I got in contact with was Mervyn Kirsch. And he also decided to send me a signed picture of him with the description of his service on the back, as well as a photocopy of his soldier's service and pay book, and then some photographs of him as a younger man during the war, as well as just some photocopies of newspaper clippings. And Mervyn Kirsch is a D-Day veteran from Gold Beach. He was a member of the Royal Army Ordnance Corps and among the first volunteer replacements to land on Gold Beach, after an advance party of 10 men sent on reconnaissance was torpedoed with only one survivor. They were to be the first ordnance soldiers to land and were directly under 2nd Army HQ, but primarily served the 50th Highlands Division of the Triple X Corps. After Normandy, he was involved in Holland and Germany, and after the war, he was stationed in Egypt. For the last two, we will travel all the way to the land of the free, home of the brave. And the first one we'll talk about is probably the most famous veteran of the five, Vincent J. Speranza. And he is an incredibly fun guy. And he sent me a signed copy of his book Nuts for free. as well as a signed picture and his business card. And I contacted him just wanting to know a bit more of his story and unexpectedly asked for my address. And then one day, while sitting in online class, I received this package and it was his book. Now, a bit about Vincent. After graduating from high school in January 1943, he enrolled at City College of New York and enlisted in the US Army at the age of 18, after previously being rejected at the age of 16. While in the Army, he was sent to Camp Upton in New York City before being sent to Fort Benning in Georgia, where he trained with the 87th Infantry Division. He volunteered for the Parachute Infantry and was sent overseas with the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division to Scotland, England, Belgium, and France, where his unit would later fight in the Battle of the Bulge. His first engagement was, in fact, the Siege of Bastogne, where he operated a machine gun from a foxhole. During the siege, he visited a wounded comrade at a field hospital. The soldier asked for a drink, and Speranza, who had no containers for the drink, found a beer tap and used his helmet as a container. He was caught by the regimental surgeon and was reprimanded, and discharged in January 1946, spending 144 days in combat. His highest rank during the war was Private First Class. After World War II, Speranza lived in Allied-occupied France and the Netherlands before moving back to New York in 1946. And he became a teacher at Curtis High School. And for his service, he received a Purple Heart, Bronze Heart, and a Presidential Unit Citation. And on August the 4th of last year, the very first thing I saw on Facebook waking up was a post on his Facebook page announcing that he answered the sunset call during the night. And he was 98 years old at the time of his death and would have celebrated his 99th birthday 2 days ago. Now, the final veteran is Charles Phillips, and he sent me a personal letter as well as a signed photo of a younger and the current version of him. And during the last couple of weeks, Amazon has been releasing a show called Masters of the Air, which serves as the quote-unquote sequel to Band of Brothers and the Pacific. And it's a mini-series of the 100th Bomber Group of the Mighty 8 Air Force. Now, Charles might not have been part of the 100th Bomber Group and not in the show, but he was still a member of the Mighty 8 Air Force. And he was part of the 91st Bomber Group. And Charles flew a total of 35 missions with the 8th Air Force as a ball turret gunner on B-17s from July until Christmas Eve of 1944. His final mission was during the Battle of the Bulge. And in an interview he gave, he said he was very excited about this first mission as he had heard stories from other ball turret gunners. And during this mission, two Focke-Wulf 190s hit the plane he was on, and he says it was over before it even began. And there was no time to be afraid as the adrenaline was just too much to comprehend what was going on around him. And he is still alive and kicking and is currently a pastor at, I believe, a Orthodox church in the United States. Thank you very much.